Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our biggest winners from week 2 of the NFL preseason. Now, right before we started, Cal and I were talking about it a little bit, and it wasn't really the most exciting week of preseason football. It was kind of a blah week all around.
Yeah.
But there's still some guys who showed up and played well, and we're going to point some of them out. But before we get to that, just a couple bits of news here. Starting off with a retirement, Miles Jack, former Jaguars linebacker and second-round pick, retires shortly after signing with the Philadelphia Eagles, a team where he was possibly even going to be a starting linebacker there and be fighting for that starting position. But he instead decides to hang up the cleats and call it quits.
Yeah, he was definitely going to get some playing time there in Philly, but before signing with Philly, he had mentioned that he had considered a career switch, and it now looks like he's going to go with that career switch.
To each their own, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it just happens. And then a couple of signings here, both by the Baltimore Ravens, starting off with corner Ronald Darby on a one-year deal, and edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney also signing a one-year deal, both, as I said, with the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens have a few injury problems, and they have had injury problems very badly the past few years. So they are making sure to get that depth now and ensure that they can go 2-3 deep at each position and still be at least okay.
Yeah, they already have a cornerback depth issues with Marlon Humphrey being out now due to injury. So the Ronald Darby signing makes sense there. And Jadeveon Clowney, that's a nice pickup anywhere you go. That's a veteran leadership guy on defense with a nice pass rushing ability.
Yep, and he's been doing it for a while. Gotta love that experience. And then finally, very recently, right before we started recording, the Indianapolis Colts allowed Jonathan Taylor to seek a trade. So with it being this fresh, nothing has happened yet, nothing is official, but they are allowing him to look around. They are allowing him to weigh his options.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where he goes now that he's going to be eligible to be traded. After first the Colts said they weren't going to trade him, they changed their mind now recently.
Very interesting watching Jim Irsay play this whole Jonathan Taylor situation. Probably not how he should have played it, but
definitely was mishandled. It looks like a divorce is now in the sights.
Not everyone's perfect, I guess. With the way the running back market is right now, who knows if Jonathan Taylor will even really find it.
It says that they want either a first-round pick or multiple picks that equal a first-rounder.
He is a beast, but we'll have to see how it goes with this new world of running backs in the NFL.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he falls.
So now jumping on to our 3 biggest winners, Callan, take it away.
So I'm going to start off with 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, who came back and played his first series after being injured in the NFC Championship game and tore his UCL, which is basically what happens to a pitcher when he needs Tommy John surgery. And usually with that kind of injury with baseball players, that keeps them out over a year to a year and a half. He's back playing football less than 8 months after it happened, when it happened in January. So less than 8 months after it happened. So he's back, and that's just good to see from someone. And they treated him like he was the starter, and I think that he's going to be the starter going into that first regular season game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We only got to see one drive from him, if I'm not mistaken. So he did look good on that drive. Didn't really have to do much, but he did look okay in it, especially considering coming back so early. And that leads right into mine pretty well, because my first winner is the 49ers team as a whole right here. Brock Purdy included in there, of course, but every quarterback, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, and Trey Lance, all played really well against the Broncos defense that isn't top of the league by any means, especially without their starters, but is a pretty good defense overall and a well-coached defense. So it's good to see from all of those guys. We also got to see Deebo Samuels play the first drive, and he had a catch and run of about 20 yards, I believe it was. So good to see that Deebo is still doing his normal Deebo things. And then also last year's Vikings preseason MVP, defensive tackle T.Y. McGill, picked up another sack. Last year during the Vikings preseason, I think he picked up like I think he was like 6 or 7 sacks in the 3 games, which was wildly impressive. And then we ended up cutting him, and he went to San Francisco and got some play time in the regular season even. And now he's continuing to show off in the preseason, which is just hilarious to me. And then, of course, a final shout out to a specialist draft pick for the 49ers, former Michigan kicker that they took in, I believe, the 5th round this year. Jake Moody knocked in 3 field goals, including the game winner.
Yeah, it was a really nice game by T.Y. McGill. I agree with that. He's going to end up breaking that rotation, that San Francisco defensive line. And, that's quite a rotation to break. But they already have a ferocious 3 or 4.
Certainly.
And then on the second winner, I got a couple of players from offense and defense for the Green Bay Packers who I think really played well. And I'm going to start on offense with the wide receiver Malik Heath, the undrafted free agent out of Ole Miss. And it seems like Ole Miss always has a receiver that makes it big in the NFL every year. And maybe this is the one. He's the undrafted guy. He wants to be the Goon, play the Goon role where, he plays that run blocking and plays the dirty plays. He wants to fill that role for Green Bay, which was previously held by Alan Lazard. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to make that role happen and they're able to keep him on the roster.
That's a good way to make your way onto the team, is just by doing the dirty work that nobody else really wants to do.
He led the team in catches and receiving yards with 5 catches, 75 yards in the preseason game.
Good for him. I love anybody who will self-describe themselves as a goon outside of the game of hockey. That's hilarious. And then for my second winner, I'm actually going to stay in the same game I just talked about, the other team that faced the 49ers last week, the Denver Broncos. And although it ended in a field goal is all, Russell Wilson got to play the first drive of this game and looked like how Russell Wilson should look. He was making accurate passes. He was leaving the pocket and scrambling well, including, I believe, a 25-yard scramble during this drive for a first down on a 3rd down when the pocket was collapsing on him. And that was really good to see for Russell Wilson because, of course, last year in general, but then also last week playing almost the whole first quarter of that game, he just did not look good. He looked like he looked last year. But now we got to see a little bit more classic Russell Wilson. And, the 49ers defense wasn't at full strength, of course, but they still had a couple of starters, and they're still a very well-coached, stellar defense overall. So it was good to see for him. And then the defense and special teams for the Broncos combined for 3 turnovers in that game. And though they did end up losing, as I mentioned a little bit ago, on a game-winning field goal by Jake Moody for the 49ers, they still played a stellar game and went up against a good opponent and put up a fight.
Yeah, it was really probably the most exciting game of the preseason this week. And I thought that Russell Wilson definitely looked more comfortable in that first quarter than he had really all of last season and last week too. But he looked definitely more comfortable this week.
Yeah, it was kind of such a hectic offseason last year when he went from being a Seahawk to a Bronco that I feel like he didn't really get to soak in and really study the playbook, and you could tell that he looked uncomfortable. So maybe now that he's had the opposite, a very underhyped offseason this year, he's been able to improve and really learn this system.
I think he'll definitely have a better year this year.
And he doesn't have Nathaniel Hackett.
Yep. It'll be like the Jaguars going from Urban Meyer to Doug P down there in Jacksonville. Similar. He'll be very similar this year to that kind of turnaround.
I could see something like that, definitely.
And then with my third player to look that was the winner for this week for the defense for the Packers was Kingsley Enagbare, the the outside linebacker edge rusher out of South Carolina, our 5th round pick last year, and he's looking like a steal. He had 2 sacks, including a strip sack and fumble recovery. He got the old, what is that, the Triple Crown when you get the sack, the fumble and the recovery.
Yeah.
So he got all 3 on Mac Jones even. So he was playing with the starters and really ended Mac Jones' night right there with that strip sack.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch much of this game, or any game really, but I watched the highlights of all of them. And when I watched the Patriots-Packers highlights, I just kept hearing that name. And then I'd watch a little bit more, and then I'd hear that name again. That's just awesome to see from a guy when they can really show out and prove to a team that they can get some play time, because let's say even he doesn't make it on the Packers for whatever reason, just that performance right there is going to get him signed somewhere in the NFL. So good to see for him.
Yep, he'll make a team somewhere, but I think that he's going to secure a nice rotational role in that edge rushing and that edge rushing depth for the Packers.
Certainly. And then finally, for my third winner, I have Colts running back Jake Funk, who picks up another goal line touchdown this week, as well as picking up the 2-point conversion right after it in a very close game that, if I'm not mistaken, gave them the lead. And then he also picked up a goal line touchdown last weekend against the Bills. And, 2 rushing touchdowns in 2 straight games is pretty good, but it's nothing special. But when you look at that situation that Jake Funk is in and the Indianapolis Colts are in general, there is a lot of opportunity for a goal line back there. There's a lot of uncertainty around Jonathan Taylor. As we just talked about earlier, he's now allowed to seek a trade and is pretty likely to get traded, it seems, at this point. And the Colts have picked up a few other running backs, including Darrington Evans and Kenyon Drake. But neither of those guys are goal line backs. So this is where Jake Funk can come in, and it is a land of opportunity inside of the red zone for Jake Funk in this coming season.
Yeah, he showed out last preseason, and he's showing out this year that he definitely can belong in the NFL, scoring those goal line touchdowns. And hey, even if you only get a couple of yards, if you can start getting touchdowns and racking those up, you'll be making a name for yourself in the NFL.
Certainly. You just love to see it, and if he can really show out and put up another goal line touchdown, or maybe even kind of prove that he can do a little bit more and put up a good amount of yards, or maybe play really well in the pass protection game, then he will very easily lock himself a spot there in Indianapolis.
It's those things like that, the small things, the special teams roles and the third down, run blocking ability that really separate the true football players from just the preseason and practice squad guys.
Certainly. You see it every year. Someone comes out of the woodworks. So that was this episode of Eating W's, our biggest winners from week 2 of the 2023 NFL preseason. Make sure to stay tuned until next week when we talk about our biggest winners from the final week of the 2023 NFL preseason. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.